a quarterback controversy in Gainesville. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along on today's show. We'll get you caught up with news and tidbits going on around the conference, including Hugh Freeze standing by his quarterback and Payton Thorne, and Billy Napier. What's he doing with quarterbacks in Gainesville? We'll talk about that. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, we got to dive right into it as Billy Napier has a decision to make over at Florida. And look, we know Graham Mertz started week 1, and he wasn't very good in the blowout loss to Miami. And then this past week, they turned to the stud freshman 5-star quarterback DJ Lagway, giving him his first career start against Samford, and he looked really good. And I get it, it's Samford. But when asked on Monday, Graham Mertz obviously went through concussion protocol last week. Billy Napier asked on Monday, what is the team's plan at quarterback moving forward? They will be hosting Texas A&M in a big SEC matchup this weekend. Billy Napier affirmed that Graham Mertz is the team's starter moving forward. However, he also mentioned that DJ Lagway, who played well Saturday, will be utilized. Napier made sure to insist both these guys will make us harder to defend. As you can imagine, a lot of Florida fans are not happy with that decision. They liked what they saw from Lagway. Look, Graham Mertz, we talked about it last year. He was one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the country a year ago, but at the end of the day, he makes a lot of safe throws, and DJ Lagway makes exciting throws. He's a stud athlete. He's a 5-star prospect. He threw for 450 yards and 3 touchdowns on Saturday, 18 of 25, averaged 18.2 yards a completion. And again, it was Samford, but it was flashes of excitement. Mertz has just been average for the Gators. His play style is limited. He can't run. His arm talent, not as big as DJ Lagway. But Mertz is a 6th-year senior, and Lagway just began his college career. So you could see why Billy Napier is going to defer to the veteran experience of a Graham Mertz. And, we're going to win a big SEC game this week, and the veteran leadership of Mertz is what's going to help us. Well, the fans in attendance last week for their game were chanting DJ Lagway throughout the swamp every time he threw a touchdown pass. After the game, Trey Wilson, wide receiver, said, yeah, I was chanting it with them. And again, it wasn't flawless for Lagway, but he set the true freshman record for most passing yards in a game and is now 9th all-time in program history. It's not just about the numbers he put up. It's just the excitement. Lagway said after the game, I was just locked into the task at hand. My coach is telling me one play at a time. That's what it is, just executing one play at a time. And the reality is, look, Graham Mertz would have beat Samford last week too if he'd have played, but he made more big throws in that one night than maybe we saw throughout Graham Mertz's time in Gainesville. And I didn't watch every game he played at Wisconsin, but maybe there too. Mertz completed 5 passes of at least 40 yards all last season. Lagway did that this past Saturday. 3 of those came on his first 4 throws in the game. Trey Wilson said that ball to Aiden Mizell, that jump was crazy because he stepped up, and to be honest, I was wide open on the play, but he just scrambled up, flicked it up like he knew it was headed down there somewhere, and he just stood right there in the pocket. That play was unbelievable. Of course, Lagway can use his legs as well. He didn't rush a whole lot this past weekend, but it opens up the playbook so much more. Play action fakes, bootlegs, all these different things you could do with a more mobile quarterback. And I saw some people making this case too. Think about this if you're Billy Napier. This is potentially the future of your job on the line. Do you want to attach it to Graham Mertz and say, we're going to take the safe veteran guy and maybe he can get us to 6 wins this year and save my job? Or take the chance on the young freshman that is exciting, that's got all the talent in the world. Maybe he makes some mistakes along the way, sure, but the big play potential from DJ Lagway would certainly be interesting. But I saw some people say this. Think about past coaching tenures who suffered as a result of a head coach choosing the veteran over the more talented backup. Both Jim McElwain and Dan Mullen. Think about Dan Mullen, in his time there, choosing Emory Jones over Anthony Richardson. You think back to choosing Franks over Kyle Trask. It's just, I think Florida fans would be, they'd be way more excited and willing to swallow a loss if you had the excitement of DJ Lagway flinging it around the field. And okay, well, we'll take our loss there. But if you start Graham Mertz and he, throws for 125 yards and you lose by 3 touchdowns, it's like there's nothing really get excited about there. But anyway, I just thought that was interesting. And choosing Felipe Franks over Kyle Trask and then choosing Emory Jones over Anthony Richardson, and look at what happened with those guys down the road. Anyway, I think it's a mistake. If it were me, and I get it's Billy Napier and his job on the line, but I would go with Emory Jones, or I'd go with DJ Lagway and just say, let's ride him the rest of the year. Let's see where this goes. Gives you a shot in the arm, some excitement of that offense. Nothing against Graham Mertz. Look, we interviewed Graham Mertz twice this offseason on the show. Love the guy's personality. But that Miami game, woof. Absolutely awful. I know the offensive line had a lot to do with that, but even more reason, play the more mobile quarterback who you can play behind a poor offensive line. He can use the legs, go buy himself more time. All right, well, that's enough on Florida. Let's switch over to the Georgia Bulldogs. Kirby Smart meeting with the media on Monday, talking about their win over Tennessee Tech and addressing injuries, specifically tight end Oscar Delp and defensive lineman Mykel Williams. Delp suffered an ankle injury this past week, did not play in the second half. Kirby Smart said Monday, Oscar is good, Oscar is fine. Did not say whether or not he would play this week against Kentucky. Now, Mykel Williams missed the game last week, suffering an injury in that Clemson game week 1. He said he's got to be able to practice, he's got to be able to run, he's got to be able to compete and go run and rehab. He did a good job this weekend of getting extra time in, but he's got to show he can help us win. So we'll see how quickly Mykel Williams progresses throughout this week. But what do you call him? Maybe a game time decision? We'll see. Well, we get injury reports now, so we'll get kind of an update on Mykel Williams if he'll be available this weekend as Georgia will travel to Kentucky. Speaking of Kentucky, Brock Vandagriff did not have a very good showing for the Georgia Bulldogs in their blowout loss for the Kentucky Wildcats in their blowout loss to South Carolina. He's a former Georgia Bulldog taking on his former team. Mark Stoops talking with the media yesterday and talked about his quarterback, completed just 3 of 10 passes for 30 yards and an interception. Stoops defended Vandagriff, saying the loss was not all on Brock. He said, I think he'll be fine. We have to play good around him. You've heard me say this, but it's very, very true. He has to have some time to throw the football, and we have to have a good plan for him. Played a great defense. Brock is tough, resilient guy. We have to play all around him, and we've got to put him in a position to be successful. Now, Vandagriff did look a lot better in the week 1 win over Southern Miss, but you got to think, look, who knows Brock Vandagriff better than this Georgia team that he's getting ready to play? Kirby Smart knows his strengths and weaknesses. It's going to be easy for those guys to game plan on him. But on the flip side, does Brock maybe know a thing or two about Georgia? Maybe he knows a weakness or two that he can attack. But Stoops said, Brock, we didn't even give him a chance half the time this past week. Let's be honest. So you can't put everything on him. But I know talking to some Kentucky fans, they're not happy with what they saw from certainly Brock Vandagriff and that offense this past week in that blowout loss to South Carolina. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Coming up next, we'll touch on injuries over at Oklahoma, Auburn, and Hugh Freeze standing by Payton Thorne. Plenty more to discuss here on Locked On SEC. I want to remind you guys, today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Ultimate Football Head Coach. Ultimate College Football HC is the game. If you're a Locked On fan, you want to check out this game. It's an amazing game simulation. You get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. You can actually be the head coach of whatever your favorite team is, Texas, Alabama, whatever it is. From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program, and it's all in your hands. And here's what we really love. You're responsible for calling offensive plays in the game. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. It's called Ultimate College Football HC. It's completely free, has no ads, and is 100% playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And, of course, we got a special offer for you from Locked On. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. So after you choose your school, you start getting your program going, go into the game store, put in the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, and make sure to take advantage of that perk. It will get your team off to a strong start. Download the game. Just visit ultimate-cfb.com. Look it up in the app stores as well. It is Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, continue on here, Locked On SEC, and we still got plenty to discuss. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out each and every day. Plenty to discuss throughout this week in the SEC. All right, we got to dive right back into it because we got plenty more to discuss around the conference, and we'll jump over to the Oklahoma Sooners. It's number 15 Oklahoma. They are going to play their first SEC game coming up in a couple of weeks, September 21st. So it'll be a high-flying big matchup against Tennessee coming to Norman. And yesterday we found out the time. The Vols and the Sooners will kick things off at Memorial Stadium at 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central on ABC on September 21st. The nation will get a firsthand look at Oklahoma as an SEC team. There's all those years in the Big 8, the Big 12. Oklahoma off to a 2-0 start, blew out Temple in their opener, but a close loss to Houston this past week. Kind of ugly. Offense did not look great. Meanwhile, Tennessee demolished Chattanooga week one and then demolished NC State, a top 25 team this past week. So Vols, they're going to host Saturday night. They're going to host Kent State. We'll see what they're able to do, but we'll see what Oklahoma looks like when they get to that game. But we know the game time. It'll be a night game in Norman. Now, Brent Venables sharing some injury updates to a couple of key offensive players yesterday. They've been banged up on the offensive line, wide receiver, and according to Venables, wide receiver Nick Anderson is nearing a return to the lineup. Could be back this week in their game against Tulane. By the way, Nick, we had on the program earlier this offseason. Great kid, and rooting for him. Haven't gotten to see him out there on the field yet. So Anderson is he was expected to be a big part of this passing game. Set the freshman record for most touchdowns of the season last year with 10. Had 800 receiving yards. Andrell Anthony is another receiver Oklahoma's hoping to get back soon. He's been dealing with a knee injury. Jaden Gibson, he got injured a couple weeks ago. He's out for the season. So, everybody complained about Jackson Arnold in the offense. They really haven't had their full complement of weapons yet. So, something to watch there. Also, their center, Girian Hatchett, started their opener at left guard, but moved over to center after Branson Hickman went down with an injury against Temple. Neither lineman was able to play in their win over Houston last week. Starting right tackle Jake Taylor is also banged up. So, again, I get the Oklahoma fans that have voiced their displeasure with what they've seen out there, but you got to get healthy. Get that offensive line healthy, get you some wide receivers back, and then we can really start to see what Jackson Arnold and company is all about. All right, over at Auburn, Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers fell to Cal this past weekend, 21-14, and Payton Thorne was Awful. 4 interceptions, completed just 14 of 27 passing attempts. Hugh Freeze, talking to reporters yesterday, said that he has a hard time not playing the guy that has performed consistently in practice, but also acknowledged that it needs to translate to the game. Freeze was to make a change at quarterback. Moving into next week against New Mexico, Hank Brown could be the guy they could turn to. But Hugh Freeze standing by his guy, saying they're not planning to make a change at quarterback right now. But bad news on the injury front for Auburn. Stud freshman wide receiver Cam Coleman and right tackle Xavier Miller were both injured over the weekend. Freeze classified both of them as questionable this week, and he indicated Cam Coleman would be more likely to play this week than Miller. But he did state on his radio show Monday that Coleman has a grade 2 shoulder sprain, and then said he's doubtful to play this weekend. So we'll see on that. But the freshman wide receiver captivated Auburn fans throughout the offseason with making big plays throughout the spring and the fall. And without Coleman, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Malcolm Simmons, and Perry Thompson will be relied upon. And 2 of those guys are freshmen. So we'll see if it gets any better. Tigers will play New Mexico this week before they kick off SEC action against Arkansas in week 4. Over at Texas A&M, they will shake up their travel schedule this year. Instead of arriving at their destination 2 days before the game, as what they did under Jimbo Fisher, the team will instead not travel for away games until Friday, the day before games. For this week, Mike Elko told reporters A&M will arrive in Gainesville 4:30 local time this Friday. Elko and his new staff looking for their first SEC victory coming this weekend in Gainesville, as the struggling Florida Gators will host the Aggies in week 3. Aggies really need a win to end their 10-game losing streak in away games. Last time the Aggies won a true road game, you got to go back to October 2021 against Mizzou. Aggies and Gators both 1-1. And for the Aggies, their road schedule much more manageable this year. They will travel to Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Auburn after the Florida game. Over at A&M, Shamar Stewart meeting with the reporters in College Station on Monday, the big D lineman, talking about the Aggies having lost 10 consecutive away games entering this weekend's road trip. He said, look, I've been here 3 years. It's not like we go out there playing to lose. We play our hearts up, but sometimes we just come up short. I don't know what it was back then, but I'm feeling pretty confident in Saturday and that we'll go in there and come out with a W. I feel like this team really stepped it up a notch today in practice. We had a different tempo to us today. One more note from Mike Elko, pretty critical of A&M's run defense so far. Notre Dame rushed for 198 yards against the Aggies week 1, and then McNeese ran for 180 yards this past week. Mike Elko said on Monday, it has been terrible, to be honest. Giving up 185 yards per game on the ground is certainly not where we want to be. So look for some improvement there. Over at LSU, Brian Kelly appearing on the Paul Feinbaum show on Monday, talking about the hot start that their quarterback has gotten off to. Garrett Nussmeier looked pretty good so far. Threw a pair of touchdowns and 300 yards in the loss to USC, and then threw for 6 touchdowns and 300 yards this past week against Nichols. And Brian Kelly said LSU is going to need all of Nussmeier's touchdowns this season. And, said, look, he's got a chance to throw, we'll see, anywhere from 40 to 50 touchdowns if he keeps this up. So certainly a high number there, but why not? He can put up some big numbers, and seen these last couple of LSU quarterbacks do that, a couple of Heisman winners in Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels. One other note, he did talk about injured running back John Emery, who tore his ACL and ended his season. Brian Kelly saying John Emery, quote, knows he has a life outside of football, and now he's going to be working toward that. So kind of intimating that John Emery not going to give it another go coming back from football, or at least his college career, right? And we'll see if he tries to make a run at the NFL level down the road. But this is going to focus on life outside of football. LSU, by the way, tough road game coming up this weekend at South Carolina. College game day heading to Columbia for that one. Over at Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin talking about being disappointed in his fans, leaving games early. Said this week, quote, when you come back into the tunnel in the second half or you're going into the end zone, you look up and you see the difference. I don't really understand it. Kiffin noted he would understand it more if the team was struggling, knowing that not only are the Rebels in the top 10, but their offense, led by Jackson Dart, has played at a really high level. He said, quote, I think it's pretty entertaining to watch a team play well. After Dart threw in the first half of 350 yards and 5 touchdowns, the first in the SEC since Joe Burrow to do that. And they have the most accurate streak in the history of the SEC, and the stadium is half empty, and you're the number 6 team in America. I don't understand it. It's frustrating, but I can't control it. I would just say, Lane, look, people, when you get up that much and you're playing a crappy opponent, nobody wants to stick around and watch you beat up Furman. No offense. Ole Miss will go on the road to Winston-Salem to take on Wake Forest this weekend. Oh, really stepping up in competition, huh? The team that just lost to Virginia. That's what it is, though, Lane. Step it up. I mean, you play a good opponent, and fans will show up. Over at Tennessee, Josh Heupel bringing his new high-powered offense to the Vols since he stepped foot in Knoxville, but he's taking exception to the term air raid. Heupel has been the Vols coach. There's been a common misconception. Tennessee runs a form of the famous air raid offense. During his presser on Monday, Heupel was asked about his offense getting the label of air raid. He said, it's kind of laughable to me, to be honest. You look at our ability to run the football since we've been here. Statistically, over close to the last decade, we've always run the ball really efficiently and effectively. We have balance. We do create big plays in the passing game, but we create those things in the run game too. I agree. Tennessee has run the football very well. They're not just flinging around the football field through the air. One other note, Paul Feinbaum and Matt Berry on their podcast, the Matt Berry Show, praising Tennessee. Matt Berry saying this week, you had better start paying attention to the Tennessee Volunteers if you haven't. And Paul Feinbaum saying, he said, I think their game against Alabama, it's going to get overshadowed a little bit this year. I know it sounds crazy, but it's the same weekend as Georgia, Texas, and Austin. But it's a playoff game in many ways because the loser of that game will have a very difficult time, especially if it's Tennessee losing at home. So interesting comments there. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. In today's episode, presented to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Look, grab a 5 Hour Energy shot to stay alert, to watch all your favorite games throughout the weekend. If you got to stay up late, you got an overtime game going, those West Coast games like Arizona State, Mississippi State this past weekend, take a 5 Hour Energy shot in the morning so you can start your day right. 5 Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years. Give them that alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy, hectic day. You can also stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. Just go to 5hourenergy.com. That's the number 5hourenergy.com. And get some 5 Hour Energy product today. You can use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That will get you 20% off your order. That offer is only valid until September 30th on one order, cannot be used with other promotions, and the code is not good on subscription orders. But go to 5hourenergy.com today. Get stocked up. When we were in Vegas, it was the lifeline to keep going, watching games there. By the way, College Game Day on the Pacific Coast time comes on at 6 a.m. Saturday morning. So you better believe it that we had some 5 Hour Energy going there. Again, go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, going along here, Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. We got a couple more tidbits we got to get to before we wrap it up, and we got to start with SEC Players of the Week. And if you missed it, the SEC releasing their Players of the Week following an interesting week 2 of performances. Most impressive showing, obviously, was Texas going into the Big House and handling up on Michigan. So your offensive SEC Football Player of the Week is none other than Quinn Ewers of the Texas Longhorns. He was fantastic, and he is your offensive SEC Player of the Week. Your defensive Player of the Week, Nick Emenwari, had the big pick 6 for the Gamecocks in their win over Kentucky. Special teams, it was Kai Kroger from the South Carolina Gamecocks, who punted very well in that game. Offensive lineman of the week, Jake Majors for Texas and Cooper Mays for Tennessee. Defensive lineman, it was Grayson Holton from Oklahoma, Tim Keenan from Alabama, and your freshman of the week was Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee. Well-deserved all around there. All right, a couple other notes here over at Alabama. Kalen DeBoer heading out on the road after a couple of home games to start the season, and they will head to one of the toughest road environments in college football, Camp Randall up at Wisconsin. His first game coaching at Alabama against a Power 4 opponent will come on the road, taking on Luke Fickell's Badgers. Kalen DeBoer off to 2-0 start so far in blowing out Western Kentucky and then needing a fourth quarter of touchdowns to pull away from USF. But DeBoer, talking on Monday, said there's nothing like playing at home at Bryant-Denny, but I think there's something in knowing you're going into a great road environment. These guys really probably haven't been there. We have a couple guys from the Midwest that have seen it or been on a visit at some point, but it's going to be a great atmosphere up there, and I think it's one that when you're preparing to go play those games, we'll, of course, have that many times here with the SEC schedule, but that hostile environment, taking it on, just kind of knowing that you versus everyone there, I think our guys are looking forward to the challenge. I look forward to improving on this last week and knowing that we're going to have to in order to get a win against Wisconsin on Saturday. And Alabama's trip to Wisconsin is part of a home and home. The Badgers will visit Tuscaloosa next year, September 2025. Over at Washington, DeBoer only lost 3 games in 2 seasons, so expectations high for him in Tuscaloosa. We'll see if they can get that road victory this week. Over at Texas, Steve Sarkisian, they're coming off of their big, impressive road win over the defending national champs, Michigan, up in the Big House. They will host UTSA this weekend in Austin, and Steve Sarkisian reminding his team, you better show up and you better be on alert. He showed them the clip of Northern Illinois beating Notre Dame at home this past weekend. He said, I showed him that clip of the game-winning field goal of Northern Illinois storming the field there at Notre Dame. Said, showed him that as a good reminder that we are entitled to nothing. We're capable of anything. We've got a really good team, but we are entitled to nothing. We're going to have to go earn everything. And we're going to have to go earn the victory here Saturday night against UTSA. Roadrunners in year 5 under Jeff Traylor. He's been very good there. 40-15 record. Traylor was the special teams and tight ends coach at Texas in 2015 and 2016, so it means a little bit something more to him. And one more note here, coincidentally, on Quinn Ewers. The 2024 Heisman Trophy odds shifting a little after 2 weeks, and Quinn Ewers jumping up to plus 500 to win the Heisman over at FanDuel. Here's how it shakes up. Quinn Ewers up there at the top at plus 500. Cam Ward behind him over at Miami. Jackson Dart, Carson Beck right behind them. A little bit more of a long shot. Nico Iamaleava at plus 1,200. Jalen Milroe plus 1,200. And Garrett Nussmeier at plus 2,800 if you want to get in on an LSU quarterback winning it again. Last thing before we wrap it up here on today's show, we got our Week 3 SEC Power Rankings. Do with them what you will, but we've got, here's how I ranked them. We got Georgia number 1, Texas number 2. I moved them up with the win over Michigan, obviously. Ole Miss at number 3. I moved Alabama back to number 4. Just them watching them struggle for 3 quarters with USF. I know they pulled away late, but it was a dogfight there for a little bit. Tennessee, I bumped them up to 5. Nice neutral field dominating win over NC State. Missouri, I put at 6. I know their defense has been lights out, but, I mean, you've played Buffalo and Murray State. Can't give you a ton of credit until we see you play somebody legitimate. LSU, I put at number 7. Still think that they should have beat USC week 1, but good team. We'll have them sit right there for now. South Carolina bumped them all the way up to 8. Remember, we had South Carolina low last week with the close win over Old Dominion, but obviously you get a lot of credit for beating Kentucky on the road, so we bumped you up there. Oklahoma, we bumped them down a little bit, just, not a pleasant home win over Houston, I guess is how you would say it. I mean, it was a win, but kind of an ugly win. Vanderbilt, we moved up to number 10. I know they played Alcorn State, but come on, when's the last time Vandy's 2-0? and one of them against a Power 4 team in Virginia Tech. So we're singing Vandy's praises now while we can, because probably won't be able to in a couple weeks, but that's all right. Arkansas we have at 11. I moved them up a little bit just because of their performance against Oklahoma State. Again, another one. They should have won that game. Texas A&M, the run defense concerns me, so I've got them at number 12. Auburn, I dropped all the way to 13. Oh, you lose to Cal. Come on. Any other team in the SEC like this loses to Cal, we start talking about booting you out of the conference. Florida, I've got at 14. Again, good win with DJ Lagway, with Samford, but can't move you up a ton. Mississippi State, close loss at Arizona State, so I can't ding you much there, but got a feeling Mississippi State is going to be, they're going to take a lot of L's here in the next couple weeks. And Kentucky, I put them dead last this week, 16. You get blown out at home like that against South Carolina. Oof. It was ugly. Couldn't move the football very much. So those are our SEC Week 3 power rankings here on Locked On SEC. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Now you can go check out Locked On College Football, from NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors. Spencer McLaughlin getting you ready for an exciting year on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description of this show, so you don't need to search for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day.